It is finally April, the month where gardening really feels like it jumps into full swing in Zone 6. Today, I'm going to share with you what I sow from seed, both indoors and out, in April in my Zone 6 Ohio garden. Let's take a look. Now in April, I'm typically direct sowing a lot of the same things that I do in March. And that is because I like to have succession harvest, and I tend to plant things about 2 to 4 weeks apart so that I'm getting a continual harvest through the early summer. So I will be direct sowing things like all the leafy greens, lettuce, chard, kale, mizuna or mustard, and collards. Now most of those things I can plant successions all through the month of April. The only leafy green that I won't do that with is spinach. And with spinach, if I do a planting in April, it's only in very early April. And that is because I tend to not have success with my later sowings, only because it gets so hot here by May that the spinach just typically does not do well. I will also do successions of my root crops, so additional carrots, beets, radishes, turnips, and I'll direct sow some kohlrabi in addition to the transplants that I'm putting out. I will often also do a second sowing of peas in April. Depending on the weather, if it's staying nice and cool, I'll usually try to get some in. And then I like to do succession sowings of my herbs like cilantro, calendula, and dill this month as well. In April, I'm also planting quite a few cool season cover crops. So for example, I've got a blend over here, which is oats, vetch, and winter peas. I've got my beloved tiller radish, and then over there, I've got a mustard blend. And it's not seed, but in mid-April, I typically transplant all of my brassicas. So my broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale, kohlrabi out into the garden. I'll also be transplanting my fennel a little later in the month. And some years I'll do a late planting of potatoes this month as well. I'm still starting seeds indoors in the month of April as well. Now, if you recall in last month's video, I promised to explain why I go against the popular practice of planting tomatoes indoors in March, sometimes even February, and do them instead in very early April. So the reason is that I am lazy. I don't like to do any more work than I have to. And through a series of tests, I found that I really didn't have to start my tomatoes that early, and I didn't need them to be that big. So I was curious about how a smaller plant would do compared to a larger plant. So several years back, I did a test where I started some tomatoes at my normal time, so early March, ended up transplanting them twice into larger pots until I ended up in it was almost like a 9-inch deep pot, and then started the same variety later in the season and transplanted them directly from my small 50-cell plug trays. To my surprise, the small transplant caught up to the large transplant within a matter of weeks. It was amazing. And the time to fruiting wasn't any difference between the two. So what happened was that the larger plant was going through some transplant shock, and the smaller one was not. It was just able to bound right into growth. So ever since that test, I've started my tomatoes later and just transplanted out a smaller seedling, and it works fine for me. Now, as I mentioned in the earlier video, there is nothing wrong with starting your tomatoes early. It's not going to hurt them, but I just like to save myself some work. So yes, very, very beginning of April, I am starting tomatoes indoors. I'll also start tomatillos. The beginning of April, I will also do some late sowings of cabbage and broccoli, and I will start my Brussels sprouts at the beginning of this month. In mid-April, I will start my marigolds and my nasturtiums. I'll also direct sow nasturtiums out a little later in the garden, but I like to have these for an early start. And I will start my peanuts. Now, peanuts don't love to be transplanted, but I pretty much have to start them indoors to give them the nice long growing season that they want to be able to grow them here in Zone 6. So I start those in peat pots, the kind that you can bury pot and all, so that the roots aren't going through such a big transplant shock when I move them out to the garden. And at the end of the month, I like to start all my zinnias. Now, after getting all of that planted, we just have to wait for that frost-free date in May. So be sure to subscribe to catch next month's episode of What I Plant When, to see everything that's being sown from seed after the frost-free date in May. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.